inner dance then is not just a healing or transformative modality as it is normally understood in the introductory workshops being presented in the world. Inner dance, as we deepen into the what we call the energy ascent, as energy descent takes place, and as we journey into the reaches of the circadian rhythms, if this is an analogy, not just what we go through at night, but also our life wave, that maybe there's a part of our evolution that brings us here and allows us to travel into the up and down, interesting, polarized byways of the REM stages of life. That basically conversation comes up. Conversation, language, meaning making, intimate communication comes up. So we're going to be looking at what that means today in relation to the meeting of the many parts, or also to understand that the word whole on, based on Kostler's work, says that part is basically the whole, that the whole is as immeasurably, irreducibly complete as the aspect of the whole thing. That's a philosophical quandary, so I don't want to go too deeply into that. Basically, today's journey is going to bring us into this particular model right here is whole brain framework. What does it mean to be whole? And what this in particular shares with us is that we basically progress from A, B, C, D as we journey into the aspects of us that are holistic, intuitive, integrative, synthesizing what is also known as the imaginative, artistic, holistic, conceptual modes, the integral modes. And on the way there, we need to pass through what's called the logician, the organizer, the communicator roles before we enter into our role as the visionary. Maybe one of the more idealized ways of expecting that something is bound to be gifted to those who sojourn into these stages of the life world journey. Okay, so this might be just an introduction, a long introduction to something that has many parts. So if this is what human beings look like, okay, they look like a fish, or they look like part of an energy wave. When we conduct inner dance processes around the world, because of the sheer complexities that are the human being, it is sometimes convenient to understand people through different sections. Okay, let's add to the opacity. 3 different sections. The lower region, the upper region, and the middle region. It is helpful to look at this in a way that we understand there are certain blockages and there are certain openings that are connoted in each of the 3 different sections. And if I was to go directly into that, based on the feedback that does come up in the numerous inner dance workshops that happens around the world, depending on the culture and depending on the situation, the context, the geography, for example, depending on the different mindsets, the basic feedback collectively is that trust is a component that very often comes into conversation in the lower regions of the human experience, and it is intuition that normally comes up in the higher regions of um, the human experience. And in the middle, the conversation that comes up is basically, excuse me. Okay, yeah, surrender. So surrender is what comes up more or less in the middle dimension of the human experience. Okay, so how did this come about? Where is this coming from? Let me go to this slide right here. Okay, so high context cultures are those parts of the world where people tend to be very shy. So the Philippines is considered a high context culture, and these are mostly also considered shame societies or shame oriented cultures, as opposed to low context cultures that are more what's called guilt based cultures. Okay, basically what this talks about is that shame cultures are more those cultures that tend to internalize themselves. So when I say shy, if you place maybe a Filipino next to a German or an American, it's most likely that a Westerner, an American or a European would spark up a conversation before some kind of energy exchange begins to happen. This is important if we were to look at this rhizomatic life world map that we're currently using for this video set, this series of videos. Basically, when we realize that when we close language centers, when people basically are not able to speak their mind, to speak their truth, come into a deeper listening of the essence of what is basically being said, it then makes sense that the more we trap the way awareness is held, the way awareness is held in the higher regions, then we also trap the lower regions. So here we might see represented the perception or the human mind, as opposed to the dimension of the physical, the body. So what then normally traps this when it's feedbacked in these many different workshops happening in inner dance around the world is the opposite of trust is basically attachment. And what normally blocks the higher chakra is, this is a useful word, may seem a little colloquial, but judgment traps the higher chakras. And in the middle, the opposite of surrender, as feedbacked in inner dance workshops, is resistance. So when people are experiencing any kind of crisis or any issue, negativity that they bring into the work, these are normally the feedback systems that come up that talks about how people are blocked. So we're bringing up the whole brain model here by Ned Herman, more or less as a way of introducing us into an eventual turn into the blue chakra or lower right quadrant section of Ned Herman's work, that prior to our ability to shift into the holistic, intuitive, integrative, and synthesized brain, we are currently here developing our interpersonal feeling-based kinesthetic and emotional brain. In other words, this is shifting, like this is not looking the same as maybe what it looked like when we were more into experimenting into upper left quadrant A, and now I would think we were placing so much emphasis on lower left B quadrant brain. So inner dance, what it unravels is lower right quadrant, which is right limbic mode thinking process, because we're just more than tired of basically being here. Okay, so and for us to understand that, we actually need to confess and admit that the brains of people in high context cultures don't look anything like low context cultural brains, because as we will find out, language basically helps to shape not just cognition but brain systems. So this is to say, facilitating inner dance in Japan or in Zimbabwe or in India, in Canada, in Sweden, will be just as different as there might be the number of places there are where it's being done. That the system might also shift depending on personality types, temperaments, stages in cognitive development. And for that, we might have to bring up certain cognitive development theorists like Vygotsky or Piaget, or might have to even look at the psychoanalytic projects of Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud, Jacques Lacan. But before going too much into the complex, for now we are trying to elaborate on why this model is important. So if you're coming into greater clarity on just where we are now, just using this very helpful map, that, courtesy of Ned Herman, it does help to understand that we are situated in a particular place as we are shifting into a different place. And basically, what does that tell us? Where are we going? Okay, so high context cultures are basically more emotional in nature. We tend to be a lot more sensitive. So the reason why we are not as communicative is that in high context cultures, people tend to take certain words a lot more personally, meaning we're so much more highly sensitized. Cognitively speaking, it might seem like we have lower, we score lower score, we we score lower in IQ aptitude tests. Like we seem to be a little bit behind in regards to educational standards. But what in fact this posits is there is a higher level of EQ. Like we tend to be a lot more emotionally sensitive, which also makes us right-brained, which also helps us to imagine our people from colonized nations a lot more intuitive. Were that to be true, that means that we're despite that maybe all human beings are holding on to a lot of energy in the lower region, that we're also a lot more loose. We're also a lot more loose, so that the healing, one of the simple ways to understand it is as we basically, let's just erase all these. Healing is actually about facilitating trust. So amidst the many powerful and profound processes coming into us through energetic modalities like the inner dance, that healing really is just about facilitating these three different sections of the human experience, that were we to understand how the different elements of co-creativity, whether it be sound, light, word, touch, thought, converge into systems. A lot of those tools coming to us, these understanding of how sound journeys work, progression of the way languaging, or the chain of signification that happens as we talk to each other, journeys from one stage to the next. This is really just what is at work, that we are learning to facilitate these three things, and the more we do so, there's a lot of unraveling of what binds us, what maybe is what shuts down this organ, or what closes us up, in regards to the fear avoidance model that we looked at a previous video, and cognitive dissonance, which is how the mind shuts down. In fact, this model is a lot more resonant to the lower system, that which traps the body. We can talk about that later on. And Leon Festinger's model, cognitive dissonance, more or less unraveled for us in a previous video how we lock up the higher systems of judgment, which this allows us to become more intuitive. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop right here, as it might be becoming a little bit too dense for you. But again, just as a way of capping, we basically used Ned Herman's whole brain model to elaborate for us certain evolutions in not just models of cognitive development, but also models of transcendence, as we come into the understanding of the REM, awake, like dreaming awake, of what exactly it means to look at the shifts in both mind and voice, and thus in ways we experience the body as we come into the rhizomatic right brain version of perception, where we become meta, metacognitive, meta dialogic, as we come to understand ourselves as really like nested layers of meaning. We are shifting into the digital brain, intuitive brain, which is more aware of the holons at work, the holistic, intuitive, integrative, um, synthesized, upper right, the quadrant of this model. And so we're just in the introductory phases. We're going to be, you can almost imagine and recognize why understanding energy language is important, understanding that it is precisely our inability to speak and listen effectively, because we have the undeveloped lower right C quadrant system that's being worked on now, that inner dance actually tends to heal that before we truly go into the genuine versions of wakeful REM. We're actually still in the release stages as we deepen into the very deep meditative entry stages. Okay, so there really is a lot more, and I'm kind of enjoying this for now, like being able to take time, take a lot more time. I'm welcoming you into my mind, and I'm helping you to see what it might be like to be inside me, whether it's disturbing for you or not. I'm hoping that if you've made it this far, that you are interested in the meeting of states and structures of consciousness, the marriage of left and right brain, that as we go out of the mind, we go into the mind, that as we die, we wake up, as we go to sleep, we also are birthed, and that it is a kind of feeling too, that we are learning to sit with our many different parts as we journey into our understanding of ourselves as a whole, that we're not just escaping the knowledge that is out there because it is collapsing, and in the collapse, if we are becoming more and more interested in aspects of Godhood that rests in every cell of our being. So I hope you have a good day or good evening, whatever time of the circadian cycle that I'm catching you in. Sending you lots of love. Goodbye for now.